mondo pronto all'implosione, le tue preghiere ormai sono vane. Effetto, sentenza, autodistruzione. Il fuoco sale dal terzo girone. Alta tensione, alta tensione. Questa è la fine, la rivoluzione. Alta tensione, alta tensione. Attacco al potere, fuoco alle banche. Mai più un mondo di consumo e produzione. Ritorno alle radici, alla tradizione. Lo spirito risorge nell'uomo nuovo. Del fin denaro non sarà più schiavo. La nuova alba, un nuovo sole, una bandiera, una via imperiale. Le membra tremano, non è finzione. Ecco il tuo mondo pronto all'implosione. Le tue preghiere ormai sono vane. Effetto, sentenza, autodistruzione. Il fuoco sale dal terzo girone. Alta tensione, alta tensione. Questa è la fine, la rivoluzione. Alta tensione, alta tensione.
Hey, what's up, Speed Tards? Welcome to the debut episode of Beautiful Monsters podcast. Today we're going to be covering the Constitution of Fiume by Gabriele D'Annunzio and Alceste de Ambris. This was like the first episode we did as Futurism Forever. I think we can do it better now. There are obvious reasons why I don't like the original one. People who have been paying attention for a bit should know why already, so I'm not going to bore anybody with the details. You've all heard it before. But yeah, that one's going to be taken down, and this is the new Constitution of Fiume video. So I'm joined by my former co-founder of Futurism Forever, Alcaz. How's it been going, Alcaz? Welcome to Beautiful Monsters podcast. Do you want to explain to the listeners what you've been up to lately?
Yeah, so me and Giovanni obviously founded Futurism Forever back in the day together, and we've kind of creatively and politically gone in different directions, and we decided to end Futurism Forever partially because of that. Now I do Nova Fiume is my own kind of project, and Giovanni does Beautiful Monsters. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, good to have you. I wanted to have you on for this because I've been wanting to redo it for a while. You started Nova Fiume, so it's like you make the most sense to be on this podcast. You weren't on the original one, but yeah, I think it'll turn out better this time.
I think it will, for sure.
And yeah, to fans who liked what Futurism Forever started as. You guys should like feel right at home at Nova Fiume. Like it's going to be closer to the kind of content we did originally with Futurism Forever. In year two, like some shit went down. I kind of like went in a different direction politically as a result. And yeah, Beautiful Monsters is more like what I'm into now. It's mostly inspired by like Bataille, individualist anarchism, left-wing Nietzscheanism, and whatever else interests me. Also like surrealism, Dada. There's still going to be lots of modern art, punk music, horror movies. Yeah, Beautiful Monsters is kind of an open-ended name, so I can kind of go in whatever direction I feel like going in. Like with Futurism Forever, I did kind of feel locked down into or pressured to cover futurist content all the time. I haven't changed my mind about futurism. I still love futurism. I still like Fume a lot. I still like D'Annunzio a lot, but yeah, it started to get repetitive to me, and I don't know. I was getting bored with it. I wanted to explore different things. But yeah, if you don't like the direction I'm going in now, that's okay. Nova Fiume and Alcaz will hold you down as far as that goes. I'll put the links to his Substack and Telegram channel, Twitter, all that in the description so you know where to find him.
Both of which will be a lot more active in the future now that summer is coming up, and I'll have more time off of school to actually work on the project.
Okay, based. So let's get right into it. Yeah, The Constitution of Fiume by Gabriele D'Annunzio and Alceste de Ambris. Actually, do we want to introduce Alceste de Ambris? Because he's kind of
Sure.
important.
Alceste Ambros was a national syndicalist, political theorist, I guess you could say, an activist. He worked early on with different syndicalist movements in Italy and eventually started leaning into national syndicalism a la Sorel. And he met with Marinetti and became friends with him and participated as kind of an economic/political advisor to D'Annunzio in the Fiume endeavor.
Great. Yeah, he also later went on to co-write the original fascist manifesto with F.T. Marinetti in 1919. He became disillusioned with Mussolini's movement. He felt Mussolini compromised way too much with conservatives and liberals, which I would be inclined to agree with Alceste de Ambris on that. So he ended up getting involved in anti-fascism. He actually opposed Mussolini's regime. He was part of Arditi del Popolo. He eventually had to flee Italy and all that. But yeah, he represents the early years of the movement. And like, I think the Constitution of Fiume and both the Constitution of Fiume and the Fascist Manifesto show clear differences from what like people generally think of as fascism. When we were doing Futurism Forever, like we kind of wanted to get things back to like that kind of energy. But I personally think the movement is kind of it is what it's going to be what it's going to be, you know. But yeah, I don't want to go off on that tangent. We'll also explain Gabriele D'Annunzio in case anyone doesn't know. Gabriele D'Annunzio was a famous poet in Italy. He was kind of older when World War I broke out, but he volunteered for the war anyways because he was a warrior poet. He was an adventurer. He didn't let his age hold him back. But yeah, he was like the most famous poet in Italy at that time. He didn't have to volunteer for the war. He did it because for the adventure of it. But yeah, anyway, in the aftermath of the war, for Italy's involvement, they were promised certain territories in what is now modern day Croatia along the like Istria, the Adriatic coast, like Istria, Dalmatia, and Fiume. when Italy didn't get what they were promised in the aftermath of the war, it's famously referred to as the mutilated victory, D'Annunzio decided to organize his private army and take it over by force without the approval of Italy proper. So, yeah, Fiume became known as arguably became known as arguably the first ever fascist state. It's kind of debatable whether it's actually fascism. I would say it's more like proto-fascism than fascism proper. But yeah, would you say that's accurate, or would you say
I would say it was the first fascist state. I wouldn't say it was proto-fascism at all, because I think like the spirit, the spirit of Fiume was where like fascism really crystallized its metamorphosis, I guess. Um, but and then like the later versions of fascism, debatedly, I guess, was kind of a degenerated form, like during the Kingdom of Italy. It was a degenerated form of D'Annunzio's dream in Fiume.
okay? Like, we'll agree to disagree on that. I think due to Mussolini's compromises with like conservatives and like with the church and with liberals and like the existing government in Italy, like people kind of base their ideas of fascism off of compromises Mussolini made with the existing power structure. So people who call themselves fascists today end up being more like conservatives. And they base their fascism around that. I would say the like revolutionary desires that existed in like the very early years of the movement are nowhere to be found anymore. It's a purely reactionary movement. So
Definitely
it's
in
not really,
America and Canada.
yeah, it's not even worth involving yourself in if like this is the kind of fascism you like, in my opinion. We're probably gonna like disagree on quite a few things as like we read through this. More like not Fume itself. I think we both think that's based, but its relevance to the movement today, the impact it actually had on like what fascism actually ended up being, like in real time when it was in power. Um, but yeah, I think that's like good for an intro. I should
I
probably
agree.
start reading. All right, so the enduring will of the people. Fiume, for centuries a free commune of ancient Italy, declared her full and complete surrender to the mother country on October 10th, 1918. Her claim is threefold. Like the impenetrable armor of Roman legend, Fiume is warden of the Italian marches, the furthest stronghold of Italian culture, the most distant land that bears the imprint of Dante. From century to century, through all vicissitudes, through strife and anguish, Dante's Carnaro has done faithful service to Italy. From her, as from a center, the spiritual life of Italy has shone forth and still shines forth over shores and islands, from Velasca to Lorana, from Mosciana to Albona, from Veglio to Lucino, from Cherso to Arbe. This is her claim from history. Fiume, as of old Tarsatica, placed at the southern end of the Liburnian rampart, stretches thence along the Julian Alps and is contained entirely within that boundary, which science, tradition, and history alike confirm as the sacred confines of Italy. This is her claim from position. Fiume, with will unwavering and heroic courage, overcoming every attack, whether of force or fraud, vindicated her right 2 years ago to choose her own destiny, her own allegiance on the strength of that just principle declared to the world by some of her unjust adversaries themselves. This is her claim founded on Roman right. In contrast to this threefold claim stands the threefold wrong: iniquity, cupidity, and force, to which Italy submits in sorrow, leaving unrecognized and unclaimed the victory that she herself has won. Thus it comes to pass that the inhabitants of the free city of Fiume, faithful to their Latin origin and determined to carry out their lawful decision, are framing a new model for their constitution to suit the spirit of their new life, not intending to limit the constitution to the territory, which, under the title Corpus Separatum, was assigned to the Crown of Hungary, but offering it as a free alternative to any of those communities of the Adriatic, which desire to break through all hindrances and rise to freedom in the name of a new Italy. Thus, in the name of a new Italy, the people of Fiume, taking their stand on justice and on liberty, swear that they will fight to the utmost, with their whole strength, against any attempt to separate their land from the mother country. And they will defend forever the mountain boundary of their country, assigned to it by God and by Rome. So now we're going to start the points. They're kind of put in separate groupings. So instead of stopping after every single point and talking, like it'll take forever to get through it that way. I'm going to read like each grouping and we'll talk about the points that we want to talk about pretty much, the ones that really stand out. But
I
we're
would
going
like
to
to say
read them
one.
all.
I would like to say one thing too, not to interrupt you, Gio. The
Go ahead.
the outline of the Constitution of the Free State of Fiume actually starts with some Latin, which D'Annunzio is very common in his books. He would start chapters of his books or even of his letters with Latin sentences.
Yeah.
In the Constitution of Fiume, it says, forgive my pronunciation. I can't pronounce Latin at all. She'll try. It says,
Okay.
quis.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to like write that on the screen. Like I'm gonna stop the audio and like it's gonna be written on the screen. I'm not
Okay.
gonna try and pronounce it because I'm gonna botch it. Like
Yeah.
I'm not
I'll
just
just
gonna
say what it
ignore
means.
it. Like
I'll say what it means. Is that good?
okay, yeah, that's fine.
Um. So the well, anyway, so you should add this out. So I'm getting my thoughts in order. So, um, can I say quis contra nos? I think is that Italian or Latin?
I would say that's Latin.
Okay, well, I'll just say yeah, just put the full thing on the screen. And I'll just say what it means. Okay, 3, 2, 1, start. Who is against us? Statue and order. Then it is, I swear, if the spirit is for us, then who is against us? That's the English translation of
Okay,
the Latin.
yeah. I'll also put a link to like what we're reading from in case people want to read along. Yeah, I wasn't like ignoring that there's Latin at the start. I was planning on just writing it on the screen. I'm like pausing the audio for a
I
second.
see. Yeah,
And like, yeah, I thought that would be better than me trying to pronounce it badly. And like it's at the very beginning, I can just skip over it.
I understand. I
But yeah,
understand. I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
yeah, it's no problem, dude. Yeah. People like longtime listeners are well aware this isn't I'm not Joe Rogan or some shit. This is not a professional podcast. We do this because we're interested in the subjects that we cover and yeah, we hope other people are interested too. It's like amateur hour though. Like none of us are professional podcasters or anything. We try and have some fun with it. But anyway, I'm going to start reading the points now. And like, yeah, they're in different blocks. I'm not going to stop after each point to discuss each point. We're kind of going to read each block and then stop and talk about the points that kind of stick out or are memorable or the most interesting to us. But yeah, the basis. Point one, the sovereign people of Fiume and the strength of their unassailable sovereignty take as the center of their free state the Corpus Separatum, with all its railways and its harbors. But as on the west, they are determined to maintain contact with the mother country. So, on the east, they are not prepared to renounce their claim to a frontier, more just and more secure than might be assigned to them by the next happening, in the give and take of politics, or by any future treaties which they might be able to conclude with the rural and maritime communes, after the proclamation of an open port and of generous statutes. 2. The Italian province of Carnaro is made up of the district of Fiume, of the islands traditionally Venetian, which have declared by vote that they will share her fortunes, and of any neighboring communities, which, after making a genuine application for admission, have become welcomed fraternally and in due legal form. 3. The Italian province of Carnaro is a state chosen by the people, which has for basis the power of productive labor, and for constitution widest and most varied forms of autonomy, such as were in use during the 4 centuries of our glorious communal period. 4. The province recognizes and confirms the sovereignty of all citizens without distinction of sex, race, language, class, or religion. But above and beyond every other right, she maintains the right of the producer, abolishes or reduces excessive centralization and constitutional powers, and subdivides offices and powers, so that by their harmonic interplay, communal life may grow more vigorous and abundant. 5. The province protects, defends, preserves all popular rights and liberties, ensuring international order by justice and discipline, seeks to bring back a time of well-ordered happiness, which should bring new life to a people delivered at last from government of lies and oppression. Her constant aim is to raise the status of her citizens and to increase their prosperity, so that the citizenships shall be recognized by foreigners as a title of high honor, as it was in former days under the law of Rome. 6. All citizens of the state of both sexes are equal and feel themselves equal in the eye of the law. The exercise of their constitutional rights can be neither diminished nor suppressed, except by public trial and solemn condemnation. 7. Fundamental liberties, freedom of thought and of the press, the right to hold meetings and to form associations are guaranteed to all citizens by the Constitution. Every form of religion is permitted and respected, and allowed to erect its own places of worship. But no citizen may allege his creed or the rights of his religion as a reason for withdrawing from the fulfillment of duties prescribed by the law. Misuse of statutory liberty when its purpose is illegal and when it disturbs the public peace may be punished, as provided by the law, but the law must in no way transgress the principle of liberty. 8. The Constitution guarantees to all citizens of both sexes primary instruction in well-lighted and healthy schools, physical training in open-air gymnasiums, well-equipped, paid work with a fair minimum living wage, assistance in sickness, infirmity, and involuntary unemployment, old age pensions, the enjoyment of property legitimately obtained, inviolability of the home, habeas corpus, compensation for injuries in case of judicial errors or abuse of power. 9. The state does not recognize the ownership of property as an absolute and personal right, but regards it as one of the most useful and responsible of social functions. No property can be reserved to anyone in unrestricted ownership, nor can it be permitted that an indolent owner should leave his property unused or should dispose of it badly, to the exclusion of anyone else. The only legitimate title to the possession of the means of production and exchange is labor. Labor alone is the custodian of that which is by far the most fruitful and profitable to the general well-being. 10. The harbor station railway lines comprised in the territory of Fiume are the inalienable and incontestable property of the state in perpetuity. By a statute of the free port, the full and free use of the harbor for commerce, industry, and navigation is guaranteed to foreigners as to natives, in perfect equality of good treatment and immunity from exorbitant harbors, dues, and from any injury to person or goods. 11. The National Bank of Carnaro, under state supervision, is entrusted with the issue of paper money and with all operations concerning credit. A law for this purpose will decide methods and regulations to be followed, and will point out the rights, functions, and responsibilities of the banks already in operation in the territory, and of those that may be hereafter founded there. 12. All the citizens of both sexes have the full right to choose and carry on any industry, profession, art, or craft. Industries started or supported by foreign capital and all concessions to foreigners will be regulated by liberal legislation. 13. Three elements unite to inspire and control the regulation, progress, and growth of the community: the citizens, the corporations, the communes. 14. There are 3 articles of belief which take precedence of all others in the province and the federated communes. Life is a good thing. It is fit and right that man, reborn to freedom, should lead a life that is noble and serious. A true man is he who day by day renews the dedication of his manhood to his fellow men. Labor, however humble and obscure, if well done, adds to the beauty of the world. So let's stop there. That's like the first grouping of points called the basis. So yeah, let's start with the gender question. Point 6. All citizens of the state of both sexes are equal and feel themselves equal in the eyes of the law. So this is like a pretty progressive stance at this point, and it is actually pretty consistent with also stance on like equal rights for women, or like basically, yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. Do you want to, Outcast? Do you want to talk about women in Fiume? Give me a sec to like catch my breath and
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the Constitution of Fiume was the most progressive constitution at its time, especially towards gender. Even the liberal democratic countries at the time did not have did not have the level of equality that women had in Fiume at the time. Um,
it's
women don't feature very prominently in the history of Fiume, but it was definitely it was definitely a very progressive they had a very progressive ideal that you really don't even see nowadays in a lot of areas towards gender.
yeah. Um it's consistent with like the futurists also supported universal suffrage and the women's movement at that time. And so
So
did
did the
like,
original fascist manifesto.
yeah, which was written by F.T. Marinetti and
Alceste Amorous.
Alceste Ambris again, who also co-wrote this, of course. And yeah, it's also like the stuff on religion, like it is secular. Anyone has a right to um practice their religion of choice in Fiume. It's in point 7. Every form of religion is permitted and respected and allowed to erect its own places of worship, as long as they don't put like their religion before like the law or the state. Anyone
Yeah, to
can
speak
kind
on the
of.
religion question, Fiume was a very mixed religious place. You had obviously the Catholic Italians, and then you had either Catholic or Orthodox Slavs in Fiume at the time. And then you even had, Guido Miller and his yoga society. You had this Buddhist current coming into Fiume too. And even through D'Annunzio, there were a lot of people who were members of the Grand Orient, like the Masonic Lodge of Italy, who were involved in the Fiume endeavor. So Fiume was a very mixed religious place, especially for Europe at the time, which is very mono religious.
Yeah. Um, which again is like very progressive for the time. Usually people have like nations had like an official religion at this point in time. Um,
Nations still do. I mean, England has the Church of England as its official religion.
yeah, but I mean, I guess like Canada or the US anyways, like are very what do you call it?
Secular.
Yeah, secular. The word escaped me at
In
that moment.
in the law for sure.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's all I really want to say on religion. I guess like on the women question and the religious question, I don't know. A lot of people like to LARP now, especially in the third position community. Um, about like, fascism being like this inherently Christian thing. They want to make it theocratic, and they kind of do that because Mussolini, did so much for the church in his regime. But initially, like fascism was anti-clerical. Um, so Yeah, I mean, like fascism doesn't have to be this ultra religious thing. I think it turns off more people than it brings in personally. But I don't know. What do you think about like theocratic fascists or secular fascist or not secular, I don't know, like Christian
Non-secular.
fascist. Yeah,
I mean,
non-secular.
I think deviate the initial idea of fascism, which was like it was built on a form of like secular nationalism, I guess, not like a religious nationalism. Which if you look at modern day fascist groups in America, they're very much so built on Christian nationalism.
Yeah, for the most part. Italian style fascists, especially, like most of them are like trad
Catholic,
casts.
yes.
Yeah, for the
Which
most part.
I mean, yeah, the nuncio wasn't really Catholic. He was kind of like syncretic with a lot of different religions. It was really only under the influence of, I guess, Mussolini trying to, write, write the accords with the church and trying to, I guess, turn Italy into a more Catholic direction, where you saw like Italian fascism become very entwined with the church, which was, I think, to its great detriment, because obviously, like the church and the king betrayed them in the end,
Yeah. Um,
and it caused it to be a lot more reactionary, and women get back in the kitchen sort of thing.
yeah. I like, yeah. I would say like spirituality isn't incompatible with like this early version of fascism or proto-fascism, but spirituality isn't, but it's not really like a fanatical Christian movement. Like it's the like even with all the compromises that Mussolini made, like in fascism proper, like in his regime, like even still, like these were compromises made. It was like the real politic that existed in Italy at that time. Like if you're a fascist today, that's not relevant to your country, especially like in America, which has never been a Catholic country. Like I would go like not even just like Christian fascists, but someone like Nick Fuentes who like wants to base like his entire conception of American nationalism around traditional Catholicism. Like traditionally, America is an anti-Catholic country, and shit like that. Like it's just like it's confused. Like, I don't think it like they think it's good optics, but like I think it turns off more people than it actually brings in. I don't know. What do you think, Alcaz?
I think it's infantile. It's like it's believing in something that's never going to happen. America's never, it's never going to be a fucking Catholic country. Short
Yeah,
of sort of parallel, South American immigration to it that somehow has to be. It's America's never going to be a Catholic country, and if it became a Catholic country, it it would be to its great detriment. Not that that's even
yeah,
possible.
I agree. I think we've spent enough time on religion,
For
though. We
sure.
still have a lot of ground to cover. I did want to touch on what he says about property, though. The state does not recognize the ownership of property as an absolute and personal right, but regards it as one of the most useful and responsible of social functions. This is point 9, by the way. No property can be reserved to anyone in unrestricted ownership, nor can it be permitted that an indolent owner should leave his property unused or should dispose of it badly, to the exclusion of anyone else. The only legitimate title to the possession of the means of production and exchange is labor. Labor alone is the custodian of that which is by far the most fruitful and profitable to the general well-being. So like this like almost borders on like anarchism in a way, like Proudhon's famous line, property is theft, theft is property, or I'm like paraphrasing, but property is theft. Like, it's not calling for the abolition of property, but like they don't recognize it as like some God-given absolute or personal right. Like, I don't know. What do you think about like public versus private property in Fiume? Would you say it's like It was like very collectivist, right?
Yeah, I would say it's collectivist. Like they recognize personal property that like people, people did own things, but they didn't see the inalienable right of private property where you could just like hoard shit to the detriment of people around you,
Yeah,
which is a very syndicalist kind of, I guess, socialist way of viewing property.
yeah, I would agree. Are there any other points in this first grouping that you want to touch on that we haven't talked about yet?
I like the last thing by Alceste Ambrose. Life is a good thing. It is fit and right that man, reborn to freedom, should live a life that is noble and serious. A true man is he who, day by day, renews the dedication of his manhood to his fellow men. Labor, however, humble and obscure, if done well, adds the beauty to the world. I think that's a very interesting, very nice line. It's kind of saying that no matter how small your job is, no matter how small you are in like the machine, if you can still make the world beautiful through your labor.
Yeah, it's trying to like unite all aspects of the city state into like a cohesive unit. Which I guess like we're gonna get to that in the corporatist section, so I won't go
Yes,
off on a tangent about it now. But yeah, it's a good quote. It's a good line. Next grouping's pretty short. It's only 3 points. So the citizens. 15. The following persons have the rank of citizens of Carnaro. All citizens now on the register of the Free City of Fiume. All citizens of the federated communes. All persons who have made application for citizenship and who have obtained it by legal decree. 16. Citizens are invested with all civil and political rights as soon as they reach the age of 20. Without distinction of sex, they become electors and eligible for all careers. 17. Those citizens shall be deprived of political rights by formal sentence, who are condemned by the law, defaulters with regard to military service for the defense of the territory, defaulters in the payment of taxes, incorrigible parasites on the community if they are not incapacitated from labor by age or sickness. So those are the 3 points of the citizens. It's like what you have to do to become a citizen of Fiume. So he's saying like you're already in Fiume, you're a Fiumean. I'm not sure if that's the term they would use. All citizens of the federated commune, all persons who have made application, or you go through the process. There's nothing that interesting there, I don't
it's
think.
very basic,
Yeah, yeah,
constitutional stuff.
yeah. As
I
they
guess the
reach
only
the age
thing
of
of note
20,
is that like without distinction of sex, they become electors and eligible for all careers, which is kind of another gender thing where like women are allowed to get any job they want,
yeah,
no matter their
which is kind
sex.
of it's a recurring theme throughout the Constitution. We don't need to touch on it every single time, but yeah, women
For
have like
sure.
equal rights. They can do everything men can do. Um, yeah. Um, being anti-women is like cringe and gay. Stop doing it, third positionists. I kind of feel things are kind of getting better now, but I still think no. I think they're trying better to like be less ogreish. Um, at
Yeah,
least
I
in
don't see
some
much
circles.
white
I don't know.
Sharia stuff anymore, which I used to see quite a bit back in the olden days of internet
Yeah.
fascism.
Well, a few years ago, it's not really back in the day, but
It
like,
is to me, man.
yeah, and so I like Charlottesville, they were chanting fucking white Sharia now and shit. Like, yeah, it's cringy. It makes you look retarded. Don't do that shit. Um, but yeah, this was like very brief. I don't really have too much to talk about. It's good information. It got read, but um, yeah. Do you want to move on to the corporations?
For sure.
All right, the corporations. Part 18. The state represents the aspiration and efforts of the people as a community towards material and spiritual advancement. Those only are full citizens who give their best behavior to add to the wealth and strength of the state. These truly are one with her in her growth and development. Whatever be the kind of work a man does, whether of hand or brain, art or industry, design or execution, he must be a member of one of the 10 corporations who receive from a commune a general direction as to the scope of their activities, but are free to develop them in their own way and to decide among themselves as to their mutual duties and responsibilities. 19. The first corporation comprises the wage earners of industry, agriculture, and commerce, small artisans and small landholders who work their own farms, employing little other labor, and that only occasionally. The second corporation includes all members of the technical or managerial staff in any private business, industrial or rural, with the exception of the proprietors or partners in the business. In the third are united all persons employed in commercial undertakings who are not actually operatives. Here again, proprietors are excluded. Here again, proprietors are excluded. In the fourth are associated together all employers engaged in industrial, agricultural, or commercial undertakings, so long as they are not merely owners of the business, but, according to the spirit of the new Constitution, prudent and sagacious masters of industry. The fifth compromises all public servants, state and communal employees of every rank. In the sixth are to be found the intellectual section of the people. The fifth, I already read that, sorry. Studious youth and its leaders, teachers in the public schools and students in colleges and polytechnics, sculptors, painters, decorators, architects, musicians, all those who practice the arts, scenic or ornamental. The seventh includes all persons belonging to the liberal professions who are not included in the former categories. The eighth is made up of the cooperative societies of production and consumption, industrial and agricultural, and can only be represented by the self-chosen administrators of the societies. The ninth compromises all workers on the sea. The 10th has no special trade or register or title. It is reserved for the mysterious forces of progress and adventure. It is a sort of votive offering to the genius of the unknown, to the man of the future, to the hoped for idealization of daily work, to the liberation of the spirit of man beyond the panting effort and bloody sweat of today. It is represented in the civic sanctuary by a kindled lamp bearing an ancient Tuscan inscription of the epoch of the communes. That calls up an ideal vision of human labor. Fatica senza fatica. 20. Each corporation is a legal entity and is so recognized by the state, chooses its own consuls, makes known its decisions in an assembly of its own, dictates its own terms, its own decrees and rules, exercises autonomy under the guidance of its own wisdom and experience, provides for its own needs and for the management of its own funds, collecting from its members a contribution in proportion to their wages, salary, business profits, or professional income, defends in every way its own special interest and strives to improve its status, aims at bringing to perfection the technique of its own art or calling, seeks to improve the quality of the work carried out and to raise the standard of excellence and beauty, enrolls the humblest workers, endeavoring to encourage them to do the best work, recognizes the duty of mutual help, decides as to pensions for sick and infirm members, chooses for itself symbols, emblems, music, songs, and prayers, founds its own rules and ceremonies, assists as handsomely as it can in providing enjoyment for the commune, for us anniversary fetes, and sports by land and sea, venerates its dead, honors its elders, and celebrates its heroes. 21. The relation between the government of the province and the corporations and between the different corporations are regulated by the methods defined in the statutes, which regulate the relations between the central province and the affiliated communes and between the several communes. The members of each corporation form a free electoral body for choosing representatives on the Council of Governors. The first place in public ceremonies is assigned to the consuls of the corporations and their banners. So that's the section on corporations. Alcaz, sorry. What are your thoughts on like corporatism and Fiume? the
I think it's
economics of Fiume.
I think it's interesting to note that like the corporatism of Fiume was very different from like how corporatism kind of went into Italy, where the corporatism of Fiume was a lot more bottom up, to where the corporatism in like Italy, fascist Italy, was a lot more top down, with lot more like centralized control. Or in Fiume, it was far more, I guess, anarchic, to use the word. It was a lot, it was more like council based, like I guess more similar to like council communism or council syndicalism, which I guess
Yeah,
is
it's
kind of
more
the influence of Alsace de Ambris and his national syndicalism on the manifesto.
yeah, it's more horizontal and more like direct democracy almost.
Right? Yeah,
It's
yeah. It was way more direct democracy, where like fascist Italy, its corporatism was a lot more top down, like uh, you know, less horizontal.
yeah, a little bit like on corporatism. I'm not like an expert on like the history of corporatism, but like it was actually initially conceived by like the Catholic Church in
Yes.
Rerum Novarum by Pope Leo the Eighth, I think. Um but yeah, it was like supposed to be like based on like Catholic social teachings against both capitalism and socialism. Like they were looking for like a third way in between to instill like Catholic social teachings in the culture. This is also different from that kind of corporatism and like fascist corporatism. Uh Probably closer to like a national syndicalism. Um but yeah, anything you want to add on economics or corporatism or
Not really.
it's
I think the system would have been very interesting in Fiume if Fiume had been around for longer, because they were never really able to implement the
yeah,
corporatism of Fiume, because they were so Fiume was not a very stable state. It was never actually meant to be a state. D'Annunzio wanted Italy to annex it. It was only when Italy refused to annex it that D'Annunzio declared it a state. That's why it was called the Regency of Carnero, because it was a regency. It was waiting for Italy to come and annex it.
yeah. um I'll just like throw it in there. Originally we wanted to have Crux of the New Generation on for this. They were like because Alcaz and Crux have like opposing points of view as far as like the economics of Fiume. Would have been interesting to get like a communist versus like a third positionist on like class cooperation kind of debate going on a little bit in this point. Maybe we'll like do that some other time because Crux wasn't able to make it, but more broadly, if we do it, it doesn't have to be totally about like its application in Fume, just in general. I would like to like host that debate though. I think it could be good. But it's not like a guarantee that it will happen. I'm just throwing that out there. Um but yeah, if you have nothing to add to this section, we'll move on to the communes.
Sure.
The communes. 22. The ancient potere normativo will be reestablished for all communes. The right of making laws subject to the common law. They exercise all powers not specially assigned by the Constitution to the judicial, legislative, and executive departments of the province. 23. Each commune has full sanction to draw up its own code of municipal laws, derived from its own special customs, character, and inherited energy, and from its new national life. But each commune must apply to the province for ratification of its statutes, which the commune will give. When these statutes have been approved, accepted, and voted on by the people, they can be amended only by the will of a real majority of the citizens. 24. The communes have the acknowledged right to make settlements, agreements, and treaties between themselves, administrative and legislative, but they are required to submit them to be examined by the central executive power. If the central power considers that such settlements, agreements, or treaties controvert the spirit of the Constitution, it sends them up for final decision to the Court of Administration. If the court declares them to be illegal and invalid, the central executive of the province makes provision for their cancellation. 25. If order within a commune should be disturbed by faction, rebellion, or plot, or by any other form of craft or violence, if the dignity or integrity of a commune should be injured or menaced by the transgression of another, the executive of the province would intervene as mediator or peacemaker. If the communal authorities agreed in requesting it to do so, if a third of the citizens exercising political rights in the commune itself should make the request. 26. The following functions belong especially to the communes: to provide for primary instruction, according to the regulations laid down by the Central Education Authority, to nominate the communal judges, to appoint and maintain the communal police, to levy taxes, to contract loans within the territory of the province, or even outside it, provided that the sanction of the central government shall have been obtained. But this will not be granted except in case of absolute necessity. So, Alcaz, any thoughts on the communes?
A commune is like an Italian thing, right? Like it's kind of like how we divide. Like, do you know more about communes in Italy? Because it's like still a thing in Italy today. We have like it's like different cities or towns, I guess, like or like ways to divide a city.
I think it's like a district almost.
Yeah, like a
So like
district. That's a better way of saying it. Yes, like a
yeah,
district.
which like they still
I,
have like in cities now, like there are different districts and like
and
in
I think
elections and things like
In Italy, yeah, you have different communes, right? Like Milan
yeah,
has a bunch of different communes in it.
yeah.
Um,
It's just different terminology. It's basically a district.
yes. I think it's interesting that they say that like each commune can like make its own laws, I guess. It's a very decentralized kind of anarchic way to like govern Fiume, but I think it's interesting too because it makes it so like each commune in a city can kind of have their own culture and be unique. I like it.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't like deviate or take away from the greater project, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but they like, yeah, they kind of have like a certain amount of community autonomy and you know, which like, I think is a good thing. Um, that way,
It,
like, if there's something that some like commune does that you disagree with, like you can just move to a different commune, I guess. I don't know exactly how it works, but yeah, they all like kind of have equal rights and can vote for things. Like it goes back to direct democracy, which we kind of touched on briefly in the economics portion. Um, but yeah, this is like a lot more horizontal than like the fascism of like Italy. Which like I would say like just to push back on what you said at the beginning of the podcast, like you would consider Fiume the first fascist state. I would consider it like a proto-fascist state. It had a lot of influence on fascism, especially in terms of like how the black shirts presented themselves. Like the slogan "Main Frego" comes from the trenches of World War I, the RDD shock troops. They were like trench runners. Shit. Like Main Frego was a "we laugh at danger" kind of thing. Um, which carried over to like the black shirts after that. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of just rambling, so um but yeah, I would say like these are like important differences. The fact that like Mussolini's corporatism is more top down, less direct democracy. This is more horizontal, and like that's a pretty important distinction, no?
Oh, for sure. But I think I think I don't want to do a no true Scotsman kind of thing, but I think like a true fascism, which is kind of a cringe thing to say, more similar to Fiume than it is to like Mussolini's thing. And I think you kind of saw that revolutionary true fascism kind of come again in the Republic of Salo, which is a whole nother thing, a whole nother podcast we can do about Salo. But I really think it was kind of it was asleep during the Kingdom of Italy period.
Personally, like, I know a lot of like people will say like Salo was true fascism. It's what Italian fascism should have been all along. I think it's disqualifies itself from even being considered fascism because it was a Germanic puppet state. Italians didn't really have like sovereign control on Italian soil.
I would
Um,
disagree and push back with
it was
that.
they're also like at the end of World War II that they're losing. Italy is already kind of being conquered. They just have this little puppet state in northern Italy. It's too little, too late. Like the economic policies were better, I guess, but it's because it's a wartime economy. They're losing. Obviously, shit's going to be collectivized a lot more, and yeah, I like I unironically said, I think it was in the Trotsky episode that with Crux, like real fascism has never been tried except maybe in Fiume, but like I would consider this more proto-fascism. It influenced Mussolini's movement, but it's very distinct in a lot of ways too. Um, but yeah, anything we want to say about the communes themselves, or should we move on to legislation?
I can't think of anything else.
All right, me neither. We usually don't record these on like work nights. I think we're both kind of beat, but we're trying our best. I think it's turning out pretty good.
I
But
think it's been a decent podcast. I'd like to do more of these. I think it's been I think we have a good dynamic.
yeah, like we could talk about the podcast for a bit. Like there are definitely other subjects I want to get into than just like Italian futurism and fascism. But like there still are like five or so like futurist podcasts I still want to do at some point. I do want to do like a Valentine to Same Point episode. I do want to cover Luigi Russolo's The Art of Noise. I do still want to do some of the later ones, like futurism and like once like fascism became a thing, like futurist democracy. There's a few other ones, Beyond Communism. We never did one of. We kind of covered like years leading up to World War One, which I do think are like the most exciting and productive years of futurism. I kind of think like its association with fascism kind of drained the life out of futurism. But yeah, there still are a handful of like futurist episodes I'm planning on doing. It'll probably be a while before we get to them all. It's not really top priority anymore, but yeah, every few months, like we will do a futurist episode, and you're welcome on any of those. Um, you're kind of like welcome on any episode you want to come
I
on,
see.
but
Well,
like,
I look forward to it. It's been a
yeah,
while since I've been on the podcast. I think I've matured a lot since the earlier episodes we used to do.
yeah, it's been we don't do them that regularly anymore. Like since the hiatus started, we kind of, as far as real podcasts go, we've only done Trotsky on futurism and Blade Runner, and we're doing this now. So this is only the third one we've done in like a year. So it's an irregular thing now. I try and like keep up with solo readings and get the videos better, just so like the YouTube channel doesn't die. But it's like, yeah, the main focus is the blog now more so than the YouTube channel. I don't want to abandon YouTube altogether because a lot more people watch YouTube than read blogs. But yeah, that's why I continue to try and get these out when and where I can. Um, but yeah, like we're off on a tangent. We should
Yeah.
get back to the
Yes.
text. All right, legislation. 27. Two elected bodies will exercise legislative power: the Council of Senators, the Council of Provisori. 28. The Senate is elected by means of direct and secret universal suffrage by all citizens throughout the province who have attained the age of 21 years and have been invested with political rights. Any citizen who has a vote is eligible as a member of the Senate. 29. Senators remain in office 10 years. They are elected in the proportion of one of every 1,000 electors, but in no case can their number be under 30. All electors form a single constituency. The election is to be by universal suffrage and proportional representation. The Senate has authority to make ordinances and laws with reference to the penal and civil code, the police, national defense, public secondary instruction, art, relations between the communes and the state. The Senate meets as a rule only once a year in the month of October for a short, definite sitting. 31. The Council of the Provisory is composed of 60 delegates, elected by universal secret suffrage and proportional representation. 10 provisory are elected by industrial workers and agricultural laborers, 10 by seamen of all kinds, 10 by employers, 5 by rural and industrial technicians, 5 by the managerial staffs and private firms, 5 by the teachers in the public schools, by the students in the higher schools, and by other members of the Sixth Corporation, 5 by the liberal professions, 5 by public servants, 5 by cooperative societies of production, of labor and consumption. 32. The provisory remain in office 2 years. They are not eligible unless they belong to the corporation represented. 33. The Council of the Provisory meets usually twice in the year, in the months of May and November, and uses the laconic method of debate. It has authority to make ordinances and laws with reference to the commercial and maritime code, to the control of labor, to transport, to public works, to treaties of commerce, customs, tariffs, and similar matters, to technical and professional instruction, to industry and banking, to arts and crafts. 34. The Senate and the Council of Provisory unite together once a year as a single body on the 1st of December, as a Grand National Council under the title of Arango del Carnaro. The Arango discusses and deliberates on relations with other states, on finance and the treasury, on higher studies, on reforms of the Constitution, on extensions of liberty. All right, so that's the legislation part. Anything you want to discuss from there?
Yeah, I'm want to find something to discuss here. It's kind of basic legal foundations of a state. Do you have anything you can discuss?
To be like perfectly honest, like this information is interesting if you want to know like how Fiume was actually supposed to work. And you know, it's interesting to like compare how it differs from
It's
like
very direct
usually,
democracy, I'll say that. It's a lot of
yeah,
councils and like voting and
yeah.
universal suffrage. So it was very direct democracy.
Mm. Yeah, like the point I was getting at was like it's interesting, but like it's also not like that spicy. There's not like a lot. It's like good information. I think like the text kind of speaks for itself. Like this is how Fiume worked, or how they wanted it to work, how it was conceived to work, as or conceived how it should work. But yeah, like nothing really jumps out at me that like I really feel we need to talk about. There's a lot of reasons I don't do a lot of this like dry political kind of content on the channel. Hume is like a special case because it's a huge inspiration to me. It still is like I'm not into third positionism like at all anymore, but you know, I still like the early movement. I still like D'Annunzio. Um, some of the later portions when he's not talking about like the dry political stuff, like this section on music, we'll get to that, but it's like you can tell like it's D'Annunzio, it's written by a poet. Like this stuff is um Alceste Ambris, and it's like the dry political stuff. There's a bunch of
Which you kind
points
of
like
need in
that.
a constitution because you need to
Yeah,
define.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a constitution, right? But I'm just saying, like, as far as the discussion goes, like, yeah, I run an art channel. Like this is just like it's good information, but nothing's jumping out on me. Like, I want to like go on this rant
Yeah, we
about
would need
this
like a
poem.
lawyer on here to talk about
Yeah,
it.
it's not my area of expertise exactly. But like it's content, we're getting the ideas out there. You know, so yeah. there's nothing pressing that you want to talk about as far as that goes, we can move on to the next part, the executive.
Yeah, move on.
All right. 35. Executive power in the province is exercised by 7 ministers elected jointly by the National Assembly, the Senate, and the Council of Provisory. The Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Minister for Finance and the Treasury, and the Minister of Public Instruction are elected by the National Assembly. The Minister of the Interior and of Justice, the Minister of National Defense are elected by the Senate. The Council of Provisory elects the Minister of Public Economy and the Minister of Labor. The Minister for Foreign Affairs takes the title Prime Minister and represents the province in intercourse with other states. Primus inter pares. 36. The 7 ministers, once elected, remain in office for their allotted time. They decide everything that does not interfere with current administration. The Prime Minister presides over the discussions and has the deciding vote when the votes are equally balanced. The ministers are elected for a year and are not re-eligible except once. But after the interval of 1 year, they may be nominated again. So that's the executive. Do you have anything you want to talk about there?
It's very similar to the stuff before. I think it's interesting that it's similar to before. It's like a council system. You have like these different ministers presiding over, elected by like a national assembly and like a senate. So it's still kind of it's still kind of what like a syndicalist council system. But yeah, nothing that interesting. Kind of the same as the last part.
Yeah, I think we should just keep pushing forward.
Yes.
Judiciary power. The judiciary will be held by magistrates, labor judges, judges of the High Court, judges of the Criminal Court, the Court of Administration. 38. The magistrates elected to inspire public confidence by all the electors of the various communes in proportion to their number, decide all civil and commercial casts under the value of 5,000 lyre, and questions of crime where the penalty of imprisonment does not last more than 1 year. 39. The labor judges decide eases of controversy between employers and workers, whether wage earners or salaried staff. The labor judges are grouped in colleges, the members of each college being nominated by one of those corporations, which elect the council of the provisory. According to the following scale, 2 by industrial workers and agricultural laborers, 2 by all workers connected with the sea, 2 by employers, 1 by technical workers, industrial or agricultural, 1 by the liberal professions, 1 by members of the administrative staff and private firms, 1 by public production of labor and of consumption. The labor judges have power to divide their colleges into branches in order to render their proceedings more rapid. They are to disperse justice with promptitude, clearness, and expedition. A joint assembly of the branches constitutes a court of appeal. 40. The judges of the High Court adjudicate on all questions, civil, commercial, and penal, which are not dealt with by the magistrates and the labor judges, except those which are dealt with by the judges of the criminal court. The judges of the High Court constitute the Court of Appeal for sentences and magistrates. The judges of the High Court are chosen by the Court of Administration from citizens holding the title of Doctor of Law, LLD. 41. 7 sworn citizens, assisted by 2 deputies and presided over by a judge of the High Court, compose the criminal court, which tries all crimes of a political nature and all those misdemeanors which would be punished by imprisonment for more than 3 years. 42. Elected by the National Council, the Court of Administration is composed of 5 acting members and 2 supplementary. Of the acting members, at least 3, and of the supplementary members, at least 1 shall be chosen from doctors of law. The Court of Administration deals with acts and decrees issued by the legislative and executive authorities to ascertain that they are in conformity with the Constitution. Any statutory conflict between the legislation and executive authorities, between the province and the communes, between one commune and another, between the province and the corporations, between the province and private persons, Between the communes and the court, I read that line twice, fuck. Between the communes and private individuals, cases of high treason against the province on the part of citizens who hold legislative or executive power, attacks on the rights of the people, civil contests between the province and the communes, or between commune and commune, questions regarding the rights of citizenship and naturalization, questions referring to the competence function of the various magistrates and judges. The Court of Administration has the ultimate revision of sentences and nominates by vote the judges of the High Court. Citizens who are members of the Court of Administration are forbidden to hold any other office, either in that commune or any other. Nor may they carry on any trade or profession during the whole period that they are in office. Anything you want to talk about, or just keep pushing
I
forward?
will say one thing. I'm glad
Okay.
I'm not studying lawyer because legal shit like this is very boring.
Yeah, me
Um,
too. Like it's like math or some shit. It's just in your one out the other to me.
Yeah,
Like
my
it's why
parents
I
wanted
do
me
it.
to be a lawyer. I'm glad I did not pursue that path. It's you know, I'm sure it's very vital to actually running a state, but
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
very boring.
Yeah. Um,
I genuinely do not
so
have anything to say on this. Besides, I guess it's just more corporative stuff. Like it's
yeah,
just defining more how like the corporative system is going to work within the law.
yeah. Um,
The next one at least will be more interesting.
okay. Where were we? We just talked about judiciary power. So sorry, the commandant. All right.
Yes.
So 43. When the province is in extreme peril and sees that her safety depends on the will and devotion of one man who is capable of rousing and of leading all the forces of the people in a united and victorious effort, the National Council in solemn conclave in the Orengo may, voting by word of mouth, nominate a commandant and transmit to him supreme authority without appeal. The council decides the period, long or short, during which he is to rule, not forgetting that in the Roman Republic, the dictatorship lasted 6 months. 44. During the period of his rule, the commandant holds all powers, political and military, legislative and executive. The holders of the executive power assume the office of commissaries and secretaries under him. 45. On the expiration of the period of rule, the National Council again assembles and decides to confirm the commandant in his office, or else to substitute another citizen in his place, or else to depose him, or even to banish him. 46. Any citizen holding political rights, whether he have any office in the province or not, may be elected to the supreme office. So that's commandant, the commandant.
I have a few things to say about this.
Okay.
Obviously, the nuncio himself held the position of the commandant within Fiume for the entire, for the entire run of the country itself. The nuncio was the commandant,
So he gave
and
himself more than 6 months.
yes, and I will be to be fair. Fiume was in quite a pickle, to put it lightly. I mean, they were having starvation. They were constantly threatened by Yugoslavia, the League of Nations, and Italy itself. So it was definitely a time of peril.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it might be.
it comes from the whole Roman idea of the dictator, where you have like a time of great emergency, and you have like a temporary dictatorship that takes over and
Yeah,
sets the country back on the right path.
it is worth noting that this is like an illegal occupation, basically. Like it's not um condoned by Italy proper. I think the USSR is the only country that recognizes it as like a legit state.
And
Um,
the Irish Free Republic.
oh, the Irish Free Republic did too.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, they did. I believe so.
Yeah, and the Dadaists in Berlin. I think Raoul Haussmann like also recognized it as a like
I
a
believe the
legit
Hungarian
state.
Soviet The Hungarian Soviet did too, which
Yeah,
only lasted a few months, but
yeah, they had their supporters, but yeah,
it
people
was
were
all the
trying to
pariah
get,
nations. It was all the pariah nations like the USSR, the Irish Free State, Hungary, etc. It was all the pariah nations that like the world hated.
yeah, it is worth noting, like, yeah, like they wanted to implement all this, but in actual practice, it was kind of chaotic because, like,
Yeah, starving literally because they had to go, be pirates basically, like steal grain ships from Italy in the Adriatic. It actually got
yeah,
so bad in 1920 that they had to send all the children from Fiume out, like basically, put them on ships and basically float them to Italy because they couldn't feed that many children in Fiume.
yeah, yeah. So like the idea is beautiful and it's clearly very thought out about like the kind of structure they would like to build, but it didn't really happen like that. Like 'cause chaos surrounded Fiume throughout the 2 years that D'Annunzio held it. Um, but yeah, anything else about the commandant or move on to national defense?
No, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. But you can see that I'll say one thing. You can see like the Roman inspiration for
Yeah,
in
yeah.
this. With yeah.
I will also say, like at the very beginning, like, and this is like true of D'Annunzio all over. Like he does refer to like Dante. There are allusions to like ancient Rome, and like he like Fiume and D'Annunzio are often like thought of as like futurists, and like he was kind of revolutionary and all, but like he's drawing from Italy's past very heavily
The
in
Italian
all his
Republic,
writings.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like this is not like an example of a
Pre-Roman Empire.
futurist state. Like futurists were in Fiume, but D'Annunzio himself was not a futurist. Marinetti actually butted heads with him quite a bit. Um, because he thought he was a traditionalist. Do we want to talk a little bit just to spice things up a little bit? Because we've been reading a lot of dry legal material. The rumors about like orgies and shit, because people like to like focus on that and some of
Oh,
like
I have a
the
lot to say
crazy
about
things
that.
D'Annunzio got into. Like, yeah, let's talk about that a bit and spice it up.
So D'Annunzio definitely did lots of drugs. Like I would say Fiume was fueled by cocaine. Um, like they had more cocaine than they had food at some points. D'Annunzio definitely had fucking orgies. Some of the more salacious shit, like D'Annunzio drinking, blood out of skulls and fucking sucking his own dick and having massive gay orgies and shit. That's I'm pretty sure is untrue. The thing about D'Annunzio is he would confirm any rumor. Like if anybody had anything bad to say about him, he'd be like, "Yeah, you're right. I do that shit." Like D'Annunzio used to go around telling people he would eat babies for breakfast and stuff, which is obviously did not happen. So I think while a lot of shit did happen to Fume, it was not to the extent that was written about in like the British and the American press, where it was like this fucking satanic ritual, basically.
Yeah, D'Annunzio was very good at like promoting himself, and he understood the value of like shock value. Like he's an artist first and foremost, and he's an artist who's like almost like a Marilyn Manson or something of his time and
Oh,
day.
dude, I
Like,
was literally just thinking of Marilyn Manson. I was gonna say
yeah,
is if you look
he,
at how
he-
the American and British press wrote about Fume, it was very similar to like the Satanic Panic of the 1980s,
yeah,
where it was like the worst shit ever, and Nunzio did nothing to discourage the rumors. He just basically confirmed them all.
he confirmed them all. He probably even like was spreading some of these rumors himself because
Yeah, he
it kept him
was.
as like this controversial figure that people were talking about. That's why he's sometimes referred to as like the first rock star or whatever. It's the way
He's
he
yeah.
promoted himself.
Speaking
And
of Marilyn Manson, yeah, like, the whole rumor was D'Annunzio took out one of his fucking bones in order to suck his own dick, and that was Marilyn Manson was a rumor around him too. So
yeah, yeah. I think Marilyn Manson, I know Boyd Rice was inspired by directly by Gabrielle D'Annunzio. I've never like heard of any connection between like Marilyn Manson and D'Annunzio, or Marilyn Manson taking inspiration, but at the time he's like a similar figure to what Marilyn Manson was in the 90s. Um, you know, when the religious right thought he was going to corrupt the youth, and like he was evil incarnate and all that. Um,
Yeah, Anton LaVey was inspired by D'Annunzio too.
yeah,
Um, and like the whole shock, like because Anton LaVey would definitely wanted to shock people with the whole Satanist stuff. Like he did a lot of very shocking things to the public at the time, and he was directly inspired to do that by Gabriel D'Annunzio.
yeah. So yeah, like it would be like wrong to like think of Gabriel D'Annunzio solely strictly in like political terms, because he was like an artist first and foremost.
He actually got
And
elected to the Italian into a position in the Italian government, and he was only in there for a few months, and he got really bored and said he wasn't a politician, and he left his seat. You know, he was more
yeah,
of a warrior poet rather than a politician,
yeah, he
a
like
leader of men.
inspired. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, like I did want to talk about like I think that's where like we started on this, like Marinetti versus D'Annunzio, because he's often like D'Annunzio's thought of as a futurist, but he's
Yeah,
not. Like if
Marinelli
you
wrote a
watch
whole
any of his
thing.
movies,
I don't know what it's called. I don't think
he
it's ever been.
in Futurism's First Battles, Marinetti talks about how like D'Annunzio kind of like followed futurism, but it was as a convinced traditionalist. Marinetti is also like opposed to eroticism and sex. Like he thinks that's like a waste of people's time. They should focus on more masculine things like war and beating up art critics and shit like that.
Yeah, Guido Keller,
Mer-
like
D'Annunzio's definitely not like that. There's a lot of eroticism in his work. He's
that's all
very
his work,
into that.
man. He like most of his work is just erotic shit.
And like Marinetti attributes his erotomania to his traditionalism. Like it's not like a futurist thing. I just want to throw that out there. Like even though we're not futurism forever anymore, I've written whole articles like on this subject. Um, yeah, like that distinction has to be made. This is not like representative. D'Annunzio is not representative of futurism. They're two different things. They collaborate here and there on certain political things, but like ideologically they're very different movements, or figures.
Yeah, I would say they kind of they had the same like revolutionary spirit though. They both did. Even though D'Annunzio was a traditionalist in a lot of ways, he was he was like a revolutionary traditionalist, I guess you could say. Like he wanted to bring back like the spirit of like the Iliad, of the Trojan War into like the modern day.
Yeah, Marinetti also fires shots at him, and we reject our symbolist masters. I think like that's really like the kind of poetry that D'Annunzio wrote. He's more comparable to like not the situationists, the symbolists. um for like another example of what that is, he's closer to someone like Oscar Wilde than someone like Marinetti, or the Dadaists, or like that kind of modern art. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to draw the distinction. Anything else, or should we get back to the Constitution?
We can get back to it.
All right. So national defense. 47. In the province of Carnaro, all the citizens of both sexes from 17 to 55 years of age are liable for military service for the defense of the country. After selection has been made, men in sound health will serve in the forces of land and sea. Men who are not so strong and women will serve in ambulances, hospitals, in administration, in ammunition factories, and in any other auxiliary work according to the capacity and skill of each. 48. State assistance on an ample scale is granted to all citizens who, during military service, have contracted any incurable infirmity. and to their families, if in need. The state adopts the children of all citizens who are killed in defense of their country, assists their families in distress, and commends to the memory of future generations the names of the fallen. 49. In time of peace and security, the state will not maintain a standing army, but all the nation will remain armed, as prescribed by law, and its forces by land and sea, well and duly trained. Strict military service is confined to the period of instruction, or to periods when war is either actually being waged or when there is immediate danger of war. During periods of instruction or of war, the citizen will lose none of his civil and political rights, and will be able to exercise them whenever the necessities of active service permit. Any thoughts on national defense?
Um, I think it was kind of similar to like how I think it's interesting. It was kind of similar to the Italian Social Republic, how they set it up, where it was like more of a militia thing rather than like a standing army. Um, yeah, I think I think it's a better way of going about like national defense, where you kind of it's mandatory military service and everyone is trained to carry a gun, rather than having like this military that's very separate from the people, like you have in
Mm,
America, where the military becomes its own kind of diabolic force against the citizenry.
Yeah, well, similar situations like Salo Republic is at the tail end of a losing war, so there's all kinds of chaos going on around it. Obviously, mandatory military service, all hands on deck. You know, this is our last chance. Um, Here, it's because it's an illegally held city state um, that's dealing with chaos constantly. Um, but yeah, um, national defense. The rest of it is just like things you'd kind of expect. There's nothing too spicy in there, I don't think. Move on to public instruction.
For sure.
All right, point 50. For any race of noble origin, culture is the best of all weapons. This is when it starts getting a little more into our lane. For the Adriatic race, harassed for centuries by a ceaseless struggle with an unlettered usurper, culture is more than a weapon. Like faith and justice, it is an unconquerable force. For the people of Fiume, at the moment of her rebirth to liberty, it becomes the instrument more helpful than any other against the insidious plots that have encircled her for centuries. Culture is the preservative against corruption, the buttress against ruin. In Dante's Carnaro, the culture of the language of Dante is the custodian of that which has ever been reckoned as the most precious treasure of the people, the highest testimony to the nobility of their origin, the chief sign of their moral right of rule. That moral right is what the new state must fight for. On its will to victory is founded the exaltation of the human ideal. The new state, with unity completed, liberty achieved, justice enthroned, must make it her first duty to defend, preserve, and fight for unity, liberty, justice, in the spirit of man. The culture of Rome must be here in our midst, and the culture of Italy. For this cause, the Italian province of Carnaro makes education, the culture of her people, the crown and summit of her constitutions, esteems the treasure of Latin culture as the foundation of her welfare. 51. The city of Fiume will have a free university, housed in a spacious building, capable of accommodating a great number of students and ruled by its own special ordinances. There will be in the city of Fiume a school of painting, a school of decorative art, a school of music free from any legal interference, conducted in a candid and open spirit under the guidance of a judgment, acute enough to get rid of the encumbrance of the inefficient, to choose the best students from among the good, and to assist the best in the discovery of new possibilities, in the rendering of human sentiment. 52. The secondary schools will be under the supervision of the Senate, the technical and professional schools under that of the Council of the Provinciori, higher education under that of the National Council. In every school and in every commune, the Italian language will have the first place. In secondary schools, the teaching of the various dialects spoken in the Italian province of Carnaro will be obligatory. Primary instruction will be given in the language spoken by the majority of the inhabitants of each commune, and also in parallel classes in that spoken by the minority. If any commune tries to evade the obligation of providing those double courses of instruction, the central government of the province reserves its right to provide them at the cost of the commune. An educational council decides upon the nature and method of primary instruction, which is compulsory in the school of all communes. The teaching of choral singing based on the genuine poetry of the people, folk songs, and the teaching of decorative art based on examples of indigenous popular art will hold a first place. The council will consist of a representative of each commune, 2 representatives of secondary schools, 2 of technical and professional schools, 2 of institutions of higher education, 2 he elected by professors and students, 2 by the schools of music, 2 by the schools of decorative art. 54. Schools well lighted and ventilated must have on their walls any emblems of religion or of political parties. Sorry, will not have on their walls any emblem of religion or of political parties. The public schools welcome the followers of every religious profession, the believers in every creed, and those too who are able to live without an altar and without a God. Liberty of conscience receives entire respect. Each one may offer up his silent prayers, but there will be inscribed on the walls inspiring words that, like a heroic symphony, will never lose their power to raise and animate the soul. And there will be representations of those masterpieces, of the painter's art, which interpret most nobly the endless longings and aspirations of mankind. So, as far as public instruction goes, like music and art are very important to Fiume and the kind of education they want to instill. Like D'Annunzio obviously really highly values the arts and culture. Um, so let's start with that. There's like allusions to Dante too, which we brought up. He brings up Dante a lot in his writings. And
Yeah, I
like
mean, the whole
ancient
reason it
Rome,
was
the
called the
Renaissance.
Regency of Carnero was in reference to one of Dante's works.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, D'Annunzio was a big Dante fan, and he kind of he took a lot from him poetically. He's probably the biggest influence on D'Annunzio, like of any writer.
yeah. Here on point 50 he says, the new state with unity completed, the culture of Rome must be here in our midst and the culture of Italy. So like he sees Italy as a continuation of Rome or whatever. He's not like trying to establish a completely new Italy
Yeah, he wants to
divorced
return
from
to
it.
the culture of the Italian Republic, like the
Yeah,
pre-Roman Empire.
yeah. It's definitely not something completely new that has broken the chains of the past. And like, yeah, again, it's not futurism exactly. That's not what D'Annunzio was. Um, but yeah, we're kind of repeating ourselves. He talks about where is it? About like religious things in school. He didn't like it. Again, it's a secular society they're trying to build. People can practice whatever religions they want to, but
Yeah, one point to note is that at the time, like the Italian educational system was very divided. Um, like you had religious schools and you had secular schools, and they were basically always in competition with each other. So there was, there's a lot of issues and kind of bad sentiments between secular education and religious education in Italy, because for a long time, all education in Italy had been controlled by the Catholic Church directly. So I think D'Annunzio kind of had a bone to pick with that.
yeah,
And all the best schools were Catholic schools.
yeah,
So if you wanted to get good education, you had to kind of play by the church's line.
yeah. Um, Anything else you want to talk? I think we've kind of touched on a lot of it already.
Yeah,
But
I think it's cool that they were very into like the arts and music, because I think that's something that's very lacking in modern day education, where they don't care a lot about the arts or music
Yeah,
or that kind of stuff in higher education. Um, I also think it's cool that the students and the professors get elect their own council. It's definitely very horizontal. It's not just the professors deciding everything. It's actually the students get some say in it too. Um,
yeah, let the kids pick their own curriculum. I
yeah,
support this.
yeah. The teaching the choral singing based on the genuine poetry of the people, folk songs, and the indigenous popular arts. I think that's a jab at the church, where for a long time all the artists were just drawing religious iconography, not like actual stuff that people can, not actual stuff that was like indigenous to Italy. It was all like Catholic art. Basically, it was all religious art, and all the music they sung was like, church hymns and stuff. It wasn't actually music or stuff from the people. It was from the church.
Yeah, like the Sistine Chapel or whatever by Michelangelo, like the church would commission these arts. Michelangelo was like very subversive with it though. Like it's a very homoerotic work that the church didn't appreciate at the time. Like it's a bunch of really muscular naked dudes on the wall. Michelangelo was like gay and shit, but closeted because of social attitudes at that time. Um, but yeah, I don't know why I brought that up, but
It's an interesting tidbit. I didn't even know Michelangelo was gay, but I've never looked into him very much.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I think it's I think the nuncio really just had a bone to pick with the Catholic Church because he saw it as suppressing artistic freedom in society, which it really did. I mean, for a long time, like look even in the Renaissance period, most of the art is religious in nature because the church had all the money, so they could sponsor it.
true, true. We're going kind of long, so
Yeah,
mm,
move on.
yeah, the next few points, like we've been reading them as blocks and then stopping to talk. I'm just gonna these are like single points, so I'm just gonna like rapid fire one after the
Sounds
other.
good.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna finish reading it. The rest of it. We're getting pretty close to being done the text, and then we'll have like final thoughts instead of stopping after each one. Um, so yeah, reforms of the constitutions. 55. Every 7 years, the Great National Council will meet in a special conference to consider constitutional reforms. But the Constitution can be altered at any time. When a third of the citizens electors make a request for the alteration, the following bodies have the right to propose amendments of the Constitution: the members of the National Council, the representatives of the communes, the Court of Administration, the corporations. The right of initiative. 56. All citizens belonging to electoral bodies have the right of initiating legislative proposals within regard to questions which fall within the sphere of action of one or other council. But the initiative will not take effect unless at least one-fourth of the electors of the council in question are unanimous, moving and supporting it. The power of appeal. All laws that have received the sanction of the two legislative bodies may be subjected to public reconsideration, with the possibility of repeal, provided that such reconsideration be asked for by a number of electors equal to at least a fourth of the enfranchised citizens. The right of petition. 58. All citizens have the right of petition towards those bodies which they have helped to elect. Reduplication of offices. 59. No citizen may fill more than one official post nor take part in two legislative bodies at the same time. Recall. 60. Any official appointment may be revoked when the official in question loses his political rights through a sentence confirmed by the court of law. When the decree of revocation is voted for by more than half of the members of the electoral body. Responsibility. 61. All holders of power and all public officials of the province are legally responsible for any injury caused to state, commune, corporation, or single citizen by any transgression of theirs, whether through misdoing, carelessness, cowardice, or inaccuracy. Remuneration 62. All public officials enumerated in the statutes and appointed in the new constitution will receive suitable remuneration in accordance with the decision of the National Council, annually revised. The Aediles 63. There will be in the province a college of Aediles. Do you know how to pronounce that? Like, I don't think I'm pronouncing it right.
I do not know.
Aediles. Okay, I'm just gonna say Aediles. If I'm mispronouncing
I've
it,
never seen that word before, honestly.
yeah, I don't, yeah. So like listeners, if I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. Like, yeah, I don't,
Yeah,
enough said.
Italians should get a better language if they want you to pronounce their words right.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it myself about the Germans many times, but anyway, I'm
Yeah, I've
gonna keep
seen that.
reading.
I've seen that. I'm saying them in the comments.
Yeah, like the thing with Nietzsche is like I've always said it Nietzsche. I know it's supposed to be pronounced Nietzsche, but when I'm reading, like I just don't say it that way. Like I hear people pronouncing it both ways, so I'm aware it's supposed to be Nietzsche. I'll try next time I do a reading on Nietzsche. I'll try and say Nietzsche, you know. But yeah, um, I think it's a forgivable mistake. Anyway, the Adials, 63. There will be in the province a college of Adials, wisely selected from men of taste, skill, and liberal education. This college will be a revival not so much of the Roman Adials, as of the office for the adornment of the city, which in our 14th century arranged a new road or a new piazza with the same sense of rhythm and proportion, which guided them in the conduct of a republican triumph or a carnival display. It will provide for the decorum of life, secure the safety, decency, sanitation of public edifices and private dwellings, prevent the disfigurement of roads by awkward or ill-placed buildings, enliven civic festivals by sea and land with graceful ornament, recalling our forefathers for whom the glory of the sunshine and a few fair garlands of flowers with human beauty of pageant and motion suffice to frame a miracle of joy. Convince the workers that to add beauty, some sign of joy in the building, the humblest habitation is an act of piety, that a sense of religion, of human mystery, of the profundity of nature may be passed on from generation to generation, and the simplest symbol carved or painted on the kneading trough or on the cradle, on the loom or the distaff, on the linen chest or the cottage beam. It will try to reawaken in our people the love of beautiful line and color in the things that are used in their daily life, showing them how much in the old days could be achieved by a slight geometrical design, by a star, a flower, a heart, a serpent or a dove, on a pitcher or an oil jar or jug, on a bench or chest or platter. It will serve to show our people how the ancient spirit of communal liberty manifested itself even in the utensils that received the imprint of man's life. Finally convinced that a people cannot attain to strength and nobility without noble architecture, it will endeavor to make modern architects realize that the new materials, iron and glass and concrete, must be raised to the level of harmonious life by the invention of a new architecture. 64. Music, 64. In the Italian province of Carnaro, music is a social and religious institution. Once in 1,000 or 2,000 years, music springs from the soul of a people and flows on forever. A noble race is not one that creates a god in its own image, but one that creates also the song wherewith to do him homage. Every rebirth of a noble race is a lyric force. Every sentiment that is common to the whole race, a potential lyric. Music, the language of ritual, has power, above all else, to exalt the achievement and the life of man. Does it not seem that great music has power to bring spiritual peace to the strained and anxious multitude? The reign of the human spirit is not yet. When matter acting on matter shall be able to replace man's physical strength, then will the spirit of man begin to see the dawn of liberty. So said a man of Dalmatia, of our own Adriatic, the blind seer of Sebenico. As cockcrow heralds its dawn, so music is the herald of the soul's awakening. Meanwhile, in the instruments of labor, of profit, and of sport, in the noisy machines, which even they fall into a poetical rhythm, music can find her motives and her harmonies. In the pauses of music is heard the silence of the 10th corporation. 65. In every commune of the province, there will be a choral society and an orchestra subsidized by the state. In the city of Fiume, the College of Aediles will be commissioned to erect a great concert hall, accommodating an audience of at least 10,000 with tiers, of seats and ample space for choir and orchestra. The great orchestral and choral celebrations will be entirely free. In the language of the church, a gift of God. Statutum et ordinandum est, juro ego. So that concludes the Constitution of Fiume. I really like that last point on music. Like Nietzsche said, without music, life would be a mistake. I guess like what I like the most about Fiume is it's like how a society should be run according to like creative people. Like the arts are
Poets.
really valued,
Yeah, I think Nietzsche liked Fiume a lot. I think if Nietzsche had been alive, he would have
yeah,
maybe lived in Fiume for the time it existed.
yeah, like that original live stream I did of Nietzsche and the Fascists by Georges Bataille. Like, 'cause I was doing commentary, or trying to do commentary. I'm not good at monologuing, but like in the original live stream, which is no longer up, I did mention that like it would be interesting to hear what Bataille thought about Fiume and D'Annunzio in relation to Nietzsche, because I do think that D'Annunzio is very much like a Nietzschean figure. I think he was one of the first people to translate Nietzsche into Italian, and like was a huge person who like popularized Nietzsche in Italy at that time. So it would be like interesting to hear Bataille's stance on that. He doesn't really talk about Fiume or D'Annunzio.
Yeah, I wonder if
Um,
he ever did even mention Fiume.
yeah, like I would say that although like I don't think Nietzsche is really compatible with fascism, I think D'Annunzio is very much like a Nietzschean figure. Um, and yeah, um, anyway, do you have anything you want to say on music or final thoughts on
No, you kind
Fiume
of said
or
everything I wanted to say.
yeah, I think we've kind of covered everything that I wanted to cover. And this is probably going to be like a 2.5 hour podcast already. So, let's be real.
A lot to say, man.
Yeah, not a lot of people are probably still listening this far, but anyone who did make it to the end, thanks for listening. And yeah, we're gonna be doing podcasts sporadically for a while, but
I think this
I
has been a
haven't.
good podcast.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I hope it's better than the first one. I think we're both a little more knowledgeable about Fiume now and like the history
Yes.
surrounding it. Um, and yeah, just because like futurism and D'Annunzio and the kind of stuff we talked about at the beginning of Futurism Forever isn't the main focus of Beautiful Monsters. I'm still like really into all that stuff, and I still respect all these dudes. It's just I kind of went hard on all this shit for 2 years, and I just kind of am burnt out on it.
I get you.
I want to explore different things. Uh, Subscribe to Nova Fiume. Look at the links in the description. That's where you can find Alcaz now. I wish him the best of luck on this
Thank
project.
you.
We went our separate ways, but like there's no beef between us. We can still work together when and where it makes sense. So yeah, thanks for coming on and good luck with Nova Fiume.
Thank you, my friend.
All right, so thanks for listening, Speedtards, and we'll see you again soon. Salute.
See you. Salut.